Ameria Radio presenta Estate con Renata Tebaldi, a cura di Paolo Pellegrini.
You have heard the New York Philharmonic Orchestra under the direction of Leonard Bernstein in a performance of Ludwig van Beethoven's Leonora Overture No. 3, the opening work on tonight's Human Rights Day concert here at United Nations headquarters in New York. And Mr. Bernstein returns for another bow and asks the orchestra to rise. In just a moment, we shall hear a brief statement by this year's President of the General Assembly, Dr. Charles Malik. Dr. Malik was rapporteur of the Human Rights Commission at the time of the drafting of the Universal Declaration, and he was chairman of the General Assembly's Social, Cultural, and Humanitarian Committee when it considered and subsequently adopted, without a dissenting vote, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now Dr. Malik approaches the microphone to offer his statement.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are celebrating today the 10th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The wonderful music which we have heard and which we shall presently hear this evening from these great artists is in commemoration of that historic act taken 10 years ago by the General Assembly in Paris. I wish to thank these artists for their magnificent performance. If you study the Declaration of Human Rights, and if you fully take in both what it says and all that it has meant during this decade in international existence, you will see that the hopes that were placed in it have not been altogether in vain. According to the doctrine of the Charter of the United Nations, respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms is a necessary condition of peace, and the United Nations exists in order both to preserve peace and promote these rights and freedoms. It follows that you can grant independence to every struggling people in the world. You can solve every international conflict or dispute in the world so that there will be no more debate and no more discussion at the United Nations. You can disarm to the bone. You can make people economically happy all over the world. You can do these and many other wonderful things. But if you have not promoted and respected human rights and fundamental freedoms, you have done very little. Independence, peace, disarmament, economic security, all these are empty if your essential human dignity as a person endowed with reason and conscience is not also honored and respected. A peace that is not based on fundamental human dignity is a violation of man, and therefore already a state of war. An order that does not respect the fundamental freedoms with which we are born is already a state of unnatural disorder. A system in which conscience is tortured and enslaved, and man cannot be himself as he is meant to be by nature, seeking and affirming and being what his mature conscience alone dictates, and loving freedom and truth and being for their own sake, such a system already harbors its own doom. for it is against nature and therefore against man, and nature knows sooner or later how to avenge itself. History is the realization of freedom in the truth. Freedom in the truth. And that is why our work for human rights and fundamental freedoms is in line with the deepest law of history. All tyranny, all darkness, all arbitrariness, all perversion of man and of the truth shall pass away. For if the millstones of nature and of God grind slowly, they also grind exceedingly. The cynic, the corrupt, the perverse, he who worships power and finds in it his only justification, of course does not believe this, but the manifold cleverness with which he hides his acts and prevents the full blaze of human rights from falling upon them already betrays his shame before history and his dread of its implicit judgment. The arrogance of power and injustice has its day, but only, in the end, to be an example and a warning unto future generations. And blessed is the weak and helpless, who is granted the power and the opportunity to defy this arrogance, not for the sake of defiance, but in the name of truth and man. For it is to the standard of the weak and helpless, who is persecuted for righteousness' sake, that men in God's day shall repair. The United Nations has done and will doubtless continue to do what it can in the sphere of human rights. It is obligated to do this by its own charter. The Universal Declaration will have a more glorious future in stimulating thought, in inspiring reform, in guiding action, and in penetrating legislation and law. The Human Rights Commission, the Economic and Social Council, the Third Committee, and the General Assembly shall continue and even intensify their splendid efforts in this field, challenging situations, elaborating texts, holding high and firm the standard of the Declaration, awakening peoples and nations to their duties and making them uncomfortable before their failings. But original responsibility for human rights and fundamental freedoms does not lie with the United Nations. It lies with our diverse nations, cultures, and outlooks on life. Human rights measure the spiritual and cultural maturity and responsibility of our national existence. The origin of human rights, the soil in which and from which they grow, the spirit which breathes life into them, is not the United Nations, but the home, the church, or the religious teaching in general, the law of the land, the literature of the people, and gifted artists or thinkers or prophets here and there who stake everything for man and his freedom. If these fail, the United Nations can do nothing. We all stand in the judging presence of the fullness of man. Far from the United Nations creating or adding to this fullness, it is this fullness itself that creates the United Nations. The wonderful thing is that it is not the world that justifies man, but man, the perfect man that justifies the world. And sometimes it is one utterly helpless man who justifies the whole. This is the stumbling block of the arrogant and mighty. Let us then, in all humility, so act and live as to confound the arrogant and be worthy of the fullness of man.
You have heard Dr. Charles Malek, President of the 13th Session of the United Nations General Assembly. Now, in just a moment, we shall hear the renowned Italian soprano Renata Tebaldi sing arias by Puccini and Verdi. Madame Tebaldi's appearance tonight falls during the opera season at the Metropolitan Opera House here in New York, where she has been scheduled for 26 performances during the 3-month period. Listeners tonight will hear Madame Tebaldi's vocal interpretation of the role of Mimi from La Bohème, which she performs for the first time this year, this Friday evening, at the Metropolitan. Both Madame Tebaldi and Mr. Bernstein are particularly fond of Puccini, and just about 2 years ago they combined their talents in a concert in which excerpts from La Bohème were performed at Carnegie Hall. And now, Renata Tebaldi makes her entrance on the stage here in the General Assembly Hall, followed by Director, Maestro Leonard Bernstein. She bows to the audience in this General Assembly Hall. The first aria from Act 1 of Giacomo Puccini's La Bohème, Mi, chiamano Mimi, in which the seamstress Mimi reveals to the poet Rodolfo how deeply she hungers for the beauty of flowers and the warmth of springtime. Renata Tebaldi has sung Mi chiamano Mimi from Giacomo Puccini's La Bohème. The Italian soprano bows graciously to the receptive audience here in the General Assembly Hall. The next selection is Pace Pace Mio Dio from the final act of Verdi's La Forza del Destino. Madame Renata Tebaldi has been heard in a performance of Leonora's aria Pace Pace Mio Dio. Now she and Maestro Bernstein leave the stage here in the General Assembly Hall. We note a most enthusiastic reception from the audience of delegates to the United Nations and distinguished guests and members of the Secretariat, assembled tonight to help mark the observance of the 10th anniversary of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And now, returning to the stage, Madame Renata Tebaldi. Once again, Madame Renata Tebaldi returns to the stage, this time followed by Maestro Leonard Bernstein, and it appears that we will have an encore. We are told it will be the Addio from Act 3 of Bohème.
Rosso
From Act 3 of La Bohème, we have heard the aria of Mimi Addio dolce svegliare, as sung by Madame Renata Tebaldi, accompanied by the New York Philharmonic Symphony Orchestra under the direction of Leonard Bernstein. Again, Madame Tebaldi returns to the stage to accept the gratitude of the audience assembled in this General Assembly Hall this evening. And at this moment, she receives from one of the members of the Secretariat, on behalf of the United Nations, a huge bouquet of roses. She acknowledges the orchestra and makes her exit from the stage, set up especially for this concert this evening in the General Assembly Hall. This is United Nations Radio, which on behalf of the United Nations expresses its gratitude to the performing artists and to the American Federation of Musicians and Local 802, whose cooperation has made this 10th Human Rights Day concert possible. This is Chet Gould speaking for the United Nations in New York. The second portion of this Human Rights Day concert will follow after intermission. At that time, we shall hear Mr. Bernstein conduct the New York Philharmonic Orchestra in a performance of Prokofiev's Symphony No. 5 in B-flat major, Opus 100. Now, during the intermission, we return our listeners in New York to the studios of station WNYC.
Ameria Radio ha presentato Estate con Renata Tebaldi, a cura di Paolo Pellegrini.